Good evening. The Development Commission meeting for Wednesday, September 3rd will come to order. First item of business is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting of August 20th. Are there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes of the August 20th, 2014 meeting.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Good evening. Nice to see a nice turnout. Tonight what we're going to do again is talk more about an update on the Development Commission on the Costco Master Site Plan Amendment. We're going to have a schedule update, expectations, a staff report, and a briefing response memo, and we'll open up for public comment. Again, as we did 2 weeks ago, I'd ask people that want to comment to please sign up, and when you do make your comments, I'll try to keep it to 5 minutes. I will keep somewhat of a control on it and tell you when your 5 minutes is up. Ask you to honor that so everybody has a chance to speak, and we're not here till tomorrow breakfast. So with that, I'm not sure which one of you guys is taking it, but I think Keith is.
I do the short straw. So, good evening, Development Commission. Keith Niven, Economic Development Director. So I'm going to start with an apology. I think I sent you guys an email, about one email every hour. We received a lot of correspondence associated with these proposed actions, and staff wanted to make sure that you guys received all of those. And I think at this point, at least I believe you have. So starting there. So sorry for all the emails, but I think you guys are caught up. Schedule, as the chair mentioned, there is some schedule adjustments. And part of it is, you know, when you get into a process, you need to kind of take note of your surroundings. And I think as Lucy and I talked about the last DC meeting, you guys asked a lot of really good questions. And I think there was no way that we felt like, or very little probability that you guys could be done talking about this in one more meeting. So what we talked about is, you know, could we push the schedule? Could we give you guys another bite at this apple? And the answer is yes. And so right now, you don't need to take another meeting. If you guys finish tonight, great. We can have 2 Wednesdays from now off. But if you need to meet on the 17th, then we have set aside the amount of time to do that. The second thing I want to talk about is what Lucy and I affectionately call the parking lot. And I've put the parking lot up on the wall. And what the parking lot is as we sit and talk about the items tonight, some of them can be fairly complicated, and we can find ourselves spending the entire night talking about one particular item. So if it looks like we're in the middle of a conversation that might want to be lengthy or might want to be extracted, my suggestion is we put it on the parking lot so we don't lose it. And then we come back to it later, either later tonight or maybe at the next meeting, assuming we have another meeting. So I'm going to man the parking lot, and as we talk about things, if it looks like there's things that need to go into the parking lot, I'll go ahead and put them there. And then expectations, again, just to remind the commission, what we've queued up is we've queued up an amendment to the master site plan for Pickering, a draft development agreement for Costco, and specifically the land plan, which is Exhibit D, and the staff report that's part of that development agreement. So that is, that's the extent of my introductory remarks, and I'm going to turn it over to Lucy at this point.
That was Keith Niven, Economic Development Director and Parking Lot Attendant.
Yes, I am.
And I'm Lucy Sloman, Land Development Manager for Development Services. Okay. So here we are at meeting number 2, looking at the land plan, the master site plan amendment, and the development agreement for Costco. Last meeting, we spent a lot of time talking about the land plan. And the commission and the public brought up questions. We've addressed those, at least initially, in the briefing response memo. Tonight, I want to focus more on the master site plan and the briefing response memo. So first, the master site plan amendment. So just to take a step back for a moment.
Literally.
Excuse me. So the master site plan amendment, this is the graphic that Costco showed last time, and as you likely remember, the master site plan was approved in 1987, and it set very strict limits on heights, impervious surface, land uses, and vehicular trips. Those are generally all maxed out. There were very high parking requirements and significant setbacks required. And as a result, for instance, as Costco mentioned last time, their last building in Pickering Place was 2001. In 2012 and 2013, the Issaquah City Council adopted the Central Issaquah Plan and Central Issaquah Development and Design Standards and rezoned the properties. And so I think one of the things, the ways to think about this is just with any other rezone, we are looking at property that had one zone and one kind of land use permit, and now it has a different zone and potentially a different land use permit. And that land use permit is one of the elements that's before you. I think one of the things that's somewhat confusing is that there's the master site plan that the city approved as a land use permit, which contained 1 billion conditions, of which you saw all of them in the staff report we provided you. And part of the purpose was that there was a lot of confusion around that. What was in the master site plan? What would we lose by approving this amendment? Were there things that we needed to keep track of? So although the original staff report on the land plan you received was actually a joint staff report for the master site plan amendment and the land plan, we have pulled the master site plan amendment out and created a separate staff report because it just seemed like it needed that level of detail and attention. And so the purpose of the staff report was primarily to look at the status of each of the original approval conditions. And that was in the staff report you've received. And from the staff's perspective, all but 3 of those conditions were done or complete or no longer relevant. And before I go on to talk about those 3 conditions, my question to the commission is, do you have questions or concerns about the status of those conditions as we presented them to you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Under the status of approval conditions under drainage down at Roman numeral 20, it says the city may take over the monitoring program, and then the status is chose not to take over. What's that? Chose not to take over? I don't know what.
So it says that the city may take over the monitoring program, and I think the response is intended to say that the city decided not to take over the monitoring program, and it's remained with the Pickering Place Owners
Yes,
Association.
I thought chose not meant that they decided to. So, thanks.
Okay.
The city decided not to.
Historically, I don't know how that decision was reached. I assume that was the city's choice, but I don't actually know the history of that decision. Any other questions? Okay. So in reviewing that, staff identified 3 conditions that we felt should be carried forward into the land plan and therefore made a part of the actions going forward. One of these was, and the numbers here, 6, 7, 8, those are the numbers as they would be consecutively added to the previous 5 conditions that staff proposed. So condition number 6 would be to maintain a 200-foot setback from Issaquah Creek as permanent open space. And staff recognizes that that 200 feet would be equivalent to Tract A. And Tract A is what is shown in blue on this slide. And in Tract A, condition number 7 would limit the use of fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides within 200 feet of the creek. And
Lucy,
yeah,
before we go any further, what
Sure.
does that mean? Limit use of fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. What does limit mean? Once a month, twice a week, every 6 months? What amounts of fertilizers, what amount of pesticides, what amount of herbicides? What does that mean?
Okay. Sounds like we'll be revising that condition and getting it back to you. I take your point. Okay. And then number 8 is the private property CC&Rs, as they may be amended from time to time, will remain on the property and will govern the use, ownership, and maintenance of commonly owned areas and facilities. So the point of this is that those common properties are owned by the Pickering Place Owners Association, and the CC&Rs are the rules by which they govern themselves and how those are to be handled, and that would remain in place to address those maintenance and ownership issues, procedures, etc.
Maybe I'm, so, but CC&Rs are private rules or regulations against the property, and you're referencing something that's not under the city's control as part of a condition of a city decision. I just don't know if that's consistent practice out there. I don't know that I've ever seen that done. So I guess I don't know that it makes that much difference if the language as you've drafted it says if they're amended in the future, or even if they're eliminated by the property owners through the process described in the CC&Rs to amend those, then I guess it doesn't really matter. Because their standing is different than a permit condition. You wouldn't generally put CC&Rs into a permit. So I was just confused about kind of the blending of the two
Right.
different ways to essentially regulate property, one private, one through the,
Keith's dying to tell you something.
Go for it.
So neither Lucy nor I were here in 1987. So as we kind of got
You
into
weren't
this,
even born then.
we exactly. So as we got into this, I think we were surprised by a lot of what happened in 1987 related to this permit. The city is signature to the CC&Rs, and so we actually, I mean, it doesn't mean that what you mentioned, Mike, won't happen. I mean, there is a scenario potentially where all of the property owners in Pickering could decide to disband and remove the CC&Rs. You know, the difficulty is you have commonly owned facilities. And so, you know, the question is you potentially decide to, you know, break that apart and dissolve it, what happens to those commonly owned facilities? So, for example, the pond that's in the middle of Pickering is one of those commonly owned facilities, and the obligations for maintaining that are part of the CC&Rs. So it's a good point. This one is a little bit of a funky duck to some extent, and I think we're trying to understand it and deal with some of those issues as well.
great.
Well, and I guess the point that I would raise with you to see if you have a thought on it, I think what we were identifying, because we were signatories, although at the time Pickering Barn was part of it and therefore the city land was in it, and since that time Pickering Barn and its land has been removed from Pickering Place, but we're still on the CC&Rs in some way. So I guess the other option is that this is sort of noted as a finding, but not as a condition. Because the tool is there, and it is the tool that's available to establish the, to handle these communal or community issues. And we're not trying to, I don't think we're trying to mandate them. I think we were more trying to identify that that would be the tool by which that, the questions that were raised last time would be addressed.
Yeah. You know, I don't know that I have an answer to the question as to whether or not putting it as a finding versus a condition, you know, has a significant difference. Although you may want to talk to legal counsel about having a permit condition or like this as in its legal standing, because it doesn't talk about as may be amended, but they could be essentially eliminated too at some point. Just want to, I guess we don't want to paint somebody else in the future looking at this saying, what were they thinking back in 2014? So I guess we want to make sure we're being clear about what we're trying to accomplish by putting that condition on. Real quick, I just, while I've got the microphone, on the chair's concern about condition number 7, as I read it, I had a similar concern about, okay, what does that really mean from an administration standpoint or an enforcement standpoint? If there's an industry standard or something out there that you could refer to dealing with sensitive areas and maintenance of landscaping within sensitive or environmentally sensitive areas, that probably would be a big help, because then you have something that you can refer to from an
And no, and I think it really was a good point, and we have language that is in development agreements and that's used as permit conditions, and I think that's where we'll start by, because that's a more tangible way of directing what that action means.
Good. Thank you.
So, this, and my only question for the commissioners is, this is the end of my presentation on the MSPA, unless there are additional questions from the commissioners. Okay. Nope. Too quick.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So, and I don't know if it's, maybe I just need some help. On page, I was looking at through the development agreement, and it may be related to this or not, you have to tell me. But there's discussion in the development agreement as soon as I find the page. Page 8 of 28, where it talks about the amendment to the Pickering Place master plan that authorizes removal of other requesting parties from the Pickering Place master site plan as long as they do it before this is enacted. So help me understand what that's all about.
So, so right now, what city code says is if you want to, so what city code says is a major amendment to a master site plan comes to the commission and then is decided by the city council. And so basically what Costco wanted to do was with B on that page is to allow any other Pickering owners to take advantage of the door that they were opening by removing themselves from the master site plan. So as the council makes that policy decision to agree to remove Costco from the Pickering Place master site plan, if any of the other property owners want to leave now too, what that's saying is that they could do that all under this council action. So so in the conversations that we've had with the city attorney is that basically we would have to have a written request by those other property owners. So at the time that the council passes the ordinance or resolution to amend the Pickering Place master site plan to remove Costco, they could potentially remove other property owners who have written requested that as well. And so the policy and the rationale here, because I'm seeing a lot of furrowed brows, the rationale here is that council has already decided from a policy standpoint, they have a different vision for this neighborhood in the city. It's part of the Central Issaquah plan. It's higher density. It's less setbacks. It's all these other things. And so from a policy standpoint, they've already kind of painted the picture of what they want this to look like. So as the property owners want out, they've really kind of wrestled with it. And so what this is saying is if there are a number of property owners that want to go now, rather than make them go through a separate bureaucratic event, because that's what the code says, they could take advantage of the door being open right now. Let's say, you know, one of the gentlemen in the audience want to then be removed from the Pickering Place master site plan, they would have to file an application. It would come to DC. It would then go to the city council, and they would have to do their own process. So that's what B is trying to say, is if anybody else wants to kind of ride the coattails, so to speak, they can.
So they could participate in this complicated bureaucratic process right now.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
So it seems to me that that would be something that we would want to encourage, since it allows for the new vision to actually take shape.
And just to have this conversation fully, maybe not fully because I don't know that we have time for that, but so the master site plan, the words, and I'm going to paraphrase the city attorney. So, you know, basically because it's like a contract rezone, it gives property owners rights. And so the city's not going to take those rights away from anybody who wants to hang on to them. But if people want to be removed from the master site plan, you know, they can do that. And so you're right. I think the more the merrier. I mean, if everybody wanted to come now and we could completely get rid of the master site plan in its entirety, I think that would be great. I think the likelihood that all the Pickering owners will do that is probably low, but there might be a few, whether they're in the audience or watching at home, that might take advantage of this. It's an opportunity. This is our incentive, if you will, to try and get more of them to be removed from the master site plan, because we see that as being advantageous in implementing the Central Issaquah plan. Okay. Sorry, that was a long way to go. Okay.
So towards that end, would it make sense to extend it out to say anybody that within 12 months of the passage would like to do it after they've seen what actually gets passed?
So the conversation, you can see a lot of strike-throughs in this paragraph. Originally, we had tried to do something along those lines, to basically say, hey, if council says this is the right thing to do, that, you know, they basically we could make it more of an administrative process, so that it doesn't have to be so bureaucratic and have so many steps associated with it. Basically, what the city attorney said is no. You got to come now, or you got to do your own process later, because whether it's a resolution or an ordinance, it's going to be specific on which properties go, and that window shuts when it happens.
Have you contacted all the property owners and advised them of this?
I personally have not.
I mean, has the city or staff made an effort to let the property owners know that this is one of the items? I mean, I'm not sure how many property owners are with us tonight or are watching home, eating popcorn and enjoying the show. But I would think that this would be something like the old, what is it, 500-foot radius of letting people know stuff is going on, that you might want to put out a letter to everybody saying this is something that we're doing, and it's a good shot to get it if you're interested in getting out.
And I don't know if Jackie wants to mention, I mean, Costco has been the one talking with the other Pickering owners about this opportunity. They held, the mayor and myself and Sheldon attended a meeting maybe about 2 weeks ago that they held in one of their conference rooms for the Pickering owners to talk about everything that's going on. And so those that attended that meeting, I think, heard the message. But I believe that one of Costco's representatives has been having that conversation with the other Pickering owners. So I believe that's happening. I just don't think the city is.
And they're receiving all these materials. So they've received the development agreement and the staff report, so not anything that specifically says this is the highlight that you should note, but that they are receiving all the materials, including the master site plan amendment.
Okay, well, receiving all of it and understanding what is here with multiple colors, underlines, blues, cross-throughs, yellows, and everything else, it's almost impossible to read this document. But I would think a letter from the city to the property owners. I don't know how many property owners we're talking about. Maybe there's only 3. I don't know.
There's,
How many?
there's more than 3, but there's
But-
less than 20 or something.
You know, a letter saying this is one of the primary issues, and it's something that we're trying to avoid future bureaucracy, so if you're interested or think you might be interested, this is your time to jump on the bandwagon.
Okay? Okay. All right. Keith got to start with an apology. I'm bearing mine halfway into the program this evening. I wrote you an email last night in which I tell you what I'm about to tell you now and discovered that I had never hit send. So I apologize for that. The briefing response memo that you received had 49 issues or topics that we had identified, grouped into the categories of land plan development agreement and master site plan amendment. Typically, and some of you may remember this from the 7th and Gilman staff report, we would go through each of those topics or issues as part of our presentation. That seemed really long. And so what we have done is focused on 8 of them that we thought were particularly, that the commission had focused on a lot. And so we're going to focus on those this evening. But you are, of course, welcome to ask us to go back to any of these for more information and or ones that we have not brought up. We just thought that this would seem like the most important ones to focus on this evening as part of our presentation. So the first one was community spaces. One of the questions was about phasing. Each building is required to have a certain amount of community space, and that community space would therefore come with that building. What is the amount of community space required? There's a certain minimum amount that's required with each building. The proposals are substantially more than that minimum. In writing this response, there was something that struck me that I wanted to point out, which is the Central Issaquah standards talk about 2 kinds of community space. There's required community space that comes with each building and significant community spaces that come with each district. And the required community spaces seem to be more associated with the people who are using that building, the people in the immediate area. The significant community spaces are really intended for the public and for serving the larger area. And it's not that the required community spaces may not be used by other people who are not working in that building, for instance. But really the significant ones are, I think, the key ones in terms of being public and publicly used. And I make that point just because I think we realized in thinking about the questions that were raised that maybe community space is not a very good name for that. So we'll just keep calling it required community spaces, knowing that that may not be the best name. And I think the other piece is that these are on private property, and so the goal is to try and balance being both welcoming and respecting private property rights. Some of the questions that have come up to us around that topic made us think about the Amazon campus. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit about that because I think that there's some similarities that may provide some information about how this might be handled. What I've provided here are 2 blocks from South Lake Union in Seattle. Terry is probably the most well-known street. It has the streetcar, South Lake Union streetcar on it. The yellow circles or ovals are highlighting 2 of the spaces that Amazon has provided. There's a rather large one here that includes a sort of performance space as well as a route through the block. This one has sort of a lower space and an upper space. I'm not sure exactly when this Google aerial's from. I think it may be a while ago because if you look at this photo, which is this space right, I'm standing out here looking this way. This space up here is this space, which actually has building over it. It's covered. But I think the important pieces to point out about this, is that it's not unlike the kinds of spaces that we might get, which, this is public right-of-way and this is private property. When I originally took these pictures, which was probably for the Raleigh or Lakeside Development Agreement, the spaces looked as they do in this photo. Since then, these signs have been added, the ones up in the upper right-hand corner, and I don't know how legible that is, so I'll read it, which says, "Welcome. This plaza is private property available for public use. Please share it safely and respectfully with our tenants and your neighbors. Enjoy." And then at the bottom it says, "If you have any questions about appropriate activities, please call," and there's a telephone number. So these were added in probably the last year or so. But to give you a sense of the way Amazon, and I'm not saying this is Costco, but the way Amazon has chosen to use these spaces, you can see on this side is a kind of a garden with a green screen, because this is a blank wall, and that's where these women are sitting, reading or looking at some material together. This seating area appears sometime on this side of the plaza. And actually, the group of people that are here are a group of performers that were part of a Art on the Fly installation. So that happened all over that area of Amazon and part of town. So I just put that out there as an example of how community spaces might occur on the Costco campus. Are there questions before I leave? Mix of uses. There were some questions around this. The development agreement allots Costco 1.5 million square feet of office space, which could include up to 250,000 square feet of other non-residential uses. We want to be really clear, the city is a big supporter of mixed uses. However, the Central Issaquah standards do not require that the uses be mixed. We had the same conversation with Seventh and Gilman. There was a desire and certainly support for them to provide retail, but their choice was not to do that. And in terms of Costco, while we would like residential to be part of this part of town or even part of the Costco area, again, that is not a requirement. It is at the choice of the property owner. So, moving forward, the land plan does not preclude them mixing uses. They could, in the future, as their business model or the way they envision their campus, they could choose to mix uses, for instance, putting retail on the ground floor, and residential could be added in the future. That's just not the way it's presented right now.
So just a question on this one. So the 250,000 additional non-residential uses as far as square footage, does that include development on the existing warehouse store parcel? Or is
It could, yes.
It could. So they could, that's roughly 150,000 square feet now. They could
Right.
take that up to 400,000 square feet. Not that that model is something that they're thinking about, but that they could have a very large retail footprint right there.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, it would be nice to see it scattered around a little bit, but I understand. Okay, thank you.
Pedestrian orientation, there were a huge number of things that comments and issues that were related to pedestrian orientation, so I want to touch on a number of those. One is that given the existing nature of this part of town, there's limited opportunities to insert additional significant circulation facilities. There's the Pickering Pond over here and the Issaquah Creek. We will be gaining a new connection with the new 62nd Road, which will be great. It'll be multimodal, bikes, peds, cars, which we're all looking forward to. And in general, the way what the land plan depicts is an improvement in the frequency of pedestrian connections. As you remember probably from last time, there are connections planned between each of the buildings. that will be generally available to the public, as well as connections through the buildings that would be available to Costco employees and their guests. In terms of other things that impact the pedestrian friendliness of an area, the land plan shows a significant shift away from surface parking. Currently, the whole southern area where building 4A and 5A are 5 are shown are currently surface parking lots. Building 6 will go where there is a surface parking lot. There will remain some small surface parking lots in front of these buildings as well as this one. We feel that the Central Issaquah standards provides sufficient tools to address those small scattered parking lots when and if they occur. And I think the other piece of pedestrian friendliness to touch on, streets and the orientation to streets is really a critical part of Central Issaquah. And for some uses, that will mean buildings right at the back of sidewalk. And, for a very public use like a cafe or a store, that would be appropriate. But Central Issaquah also recognizes that there are some uses that have a heightened need for privacy or security that may need to be slightly set back from the sidewalk. Offices are one of the uses, and there are quite a few references throughout the Central Issaquah standards about offices being set back a certain amount with certain kinds of treatment of that setback to both provide the security or privacy and while maintaining a positive character along the street.
So I just want to go back to a point I raised in the last meeting, and that's regarding the trail that runs on the east side and the kind of the connection that occurs down at the southeast corner, where, and just looking back at the documents that were provided for the first meeting, that I just think we're missing an opportunity to really take advantage of that trail and integrate it into what happens on these properties. It's like I said, I think I used the term last time, the project feels like it turns its back on the trail. The garage, we raised concerns about that with the garage project, and this project continues to feel that way. And there's no, creating of community space back there, a nice visible connection from the trail into the property. Really, the only connection is the street, the new street, whatever it was, 16. I don't remember the name of the street back there, but the new road, and it's just. So it seems like we need to somehow really encourage integration of the trail and inviting the people who are using the trail to come out and take advantage of this part of the town.
So there are a couple of elements I'd like to point out just to see if they alleviate your concerns. So one point would be that there are going to be more frequent pedestrian connections such as these that are available to the public, connecting both that trail to the street. The second point that I would make is, while it's true that what we're calling the community spaces are located along the street, which is the way the Central Issaquah standards are written, and you're right that the Central Issaquah standards also want us to have a strong relationship to those kinds of facilities like creeks and other critical areas such as a wetland. Costco has proposed on the backside the kinds of semi-public spaces which they have located all along this side of their project, which are often used for seating. They're often where lunchrooms and other kinds of more public spaces are located. And so they have shown those along the creek, and I think our thought was that those kind of semi-public spaces facing the creek met the intent. Also in the answer, I think that Costco provided, and they may touch on a little more in their presentation, they really do see these as four-sided buildings. So it's not like there will be a building designed with a back towards the creek.
Okay.
Does that help?
That helps. I guess I'm just, want to keep that as part of an awareness as this project continues to evolve in its development. And it's on the parking lot, so now I'm good. So, thank you.
I have a good parking attendant. Building 4A was another one that came up, and I put it here because we revised the condition and it seemed important to draw attention to that. The comment, this image on the left was in the staff report, and there was a concern that in our identifying additional building space being provided in this location, that we might impair an opportunity for additional community space or views and vistas, which is an important part of Central Issaquah. So part of what we were responding to with that little red square was Central Issaquah Standard 11.3.h, which requires that there be 60 feet of building extending back in each direction from an intersection. And I think that we have some concerns about that area being used for community space. One is because these roads may have some volume of traffic on them, and we already have a community space, fairly large community space shown on either side of this road, and we really want those to be successful. However, we do have some concerns also that there may be conflicts with views and vistas. And so we revised, there were a series of bullets under condition number 4, and I'm not going to make you go through them all again. But the one related to this little piece right here has been revised to add that the southern wing of Building 4A needs to fulfill the corner requirements to the extent possible, given the intersection's acute angle and opportunities to preserve and or highlight views and vistas. So, in other words, when we get to the point of them proposing Building 4A, we see the kind of building they're proposing, really go out and study the site with them, have our community conversation. That will be a great time to really look in detail at what is appropriate at that particular corner in terms of balancing a number of design standards. Sky bridges, that was another piece that we spent a while talking about and where some changes have occurred. Costco currently has 2 existing sky bridges, one here and one here. The land plan proposes more essentially one between each pair of buildings, which are the yellow dotted ovals you see up there. There were concerns about the impact to the critical mass of pedestrians on the street. Would it feel like there are enough people around? I think that off-street, staff has felt that the use of sky bridges to maintain a secure campus while allowing the permeability of or frequent pedestrian connections between the street and trails seemed like a good balance. In the sense that if we did not have some of these sky bridges, what might result is an even larger building to maintain that secure campus. So that, to staff, seemed like an acceptable balance. There were concerns raised around architectural design. The commission hadn't had an opportunity to see the 8 criteria that are in the draft of the development agreement that you received. 2 of them we thought were important in addressing some of these concerns, as well as the images that were in the staff reports, and we felt like that provided us with sufficient tools to make the sky bridges a positive architectural element. I think where both staff and Costco heard the commission's concerns were potential impacts to the views along Lake Drive that we were just discussing with Building 4A, And so we, in talking with Costco, we all agreed that it would be appropriate to reduce the sky bridges that were allowed outright to cross the right-of-way from 2 to 1. Now, they get to pick which one, but the proposal, the response back to the commission is to reduce, have these as being alternatives, not both allowed outright.
Just a comment about the sky bridges. I don't know what the thought was. One of the commissioner when they made that comment about sky bridges, and I guess my thought is that sky bridge, yeah, it blocks the view as we're coming down on Lake Drive. But you know, you can make that into something real nice where it's see-through glass, and partly, you know, maybe put some kind of advertising fair that's going on and that kind of thing, and then let the sun come through. You can make that really nice, and I don't think it's a negative thing to have a sky bridge there. And I don't know where we're leading by saying, let's eliminate one sky bridge and have just one, and then this one is going to be solid block, no penetration. I don't think we want to go that route.
I would agree with that. There is a requirement that the sky bridges be at least 70% translucent glass.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And you can make a real nice sky bridge out of that. I'm sure Costco or Mulvaney can be creative about that. Yeah. So that's just my comments.
Sure, I'll just try. I get very conflicted about this because I can understand the desire to move people between buildings easily and out of the weather and so forth. But the a big part of the Central Issaquah plan was to activate the pedestrian experience and create a better pedestrian world than the 70% development of parking lots that we had. And to the extent that we take people and put them into sky bridges crossing around, we have fewer people out experiencing the pedestrian world. And I know it gets rainy and dark and everything around here, but I think when you showed the pictures of the Amazon campus, I don't remember any sky bridges they have down there and lots of people out on the street. So I get very conflicted. I can understand the desire to do it, but I don't think it fits with the Central Issaquah plan intent.
So just, I'll weigh in since I weighed in on this, I think, at the last meeting a bit. I appreciate the movement toward recognizing, you know, there are challenges between meeting kind of multiple interests here and Costco's desire for a secure campus, convenient, comfortable access to and from buildings. So, you know, I'm not going to fall on my sword on this one, but sky bridges across public properties and across public roads continues to be, I'm not a fan for exactly the reasons that Commissioner Morgan expressed, and just from a experience as you're traveling the street. I think architecturally you can make them interesting. I think one of my concerns last time was some of the examples that were provided in the packet weren't so exciting. So some work would need to be done to make it something that's an interesting feature and not just a horizontal glass tube. So I guess at this point, I think we've made progress. I think you need to be very strategic about how you locate sky bridges too. I think once you're back on the private property, I don't know that I have a big issue with that. I think that what you talked about in the way it allows for buildings to be separated, so you don't have large mass building to provide that security. At the same time, you know, I don't work for Costco, so I'm not quite sure how they are organized and how they have to travel between buildings, but generally departments are together, and from time to time they need to travel from one department or one building to another. But it just, from my point of view, less or no sky bridges is better than more sky bridges. So, but I appreciate the effort to really work through this a bit and respond to the Commission's concerns. So, thanks.
And I'll throw in a clarification too. The between buildings on the property itself, I'm fine with that. It's the one over the right-of-way. And maybe one possibility would be to design the possibility, like the one sky bridge that's shown in the lower picture, design the possibility of having one, but not allow it unless it was shown that there was a risk if there's too much traffic on the road and a risk of conflict with pedestrians and traffic, that they could show that it would be better to have people away from that traffic, maybe be able to allow it later on, so.
Thank you. Okay.
And if I just have to throw 2 cents in just because I do. So the thing about it is, you know, sky bridges, for all the reasons you guys have said, it's kind of it can detract from what we're trying to do on the street. I think we all recognize that Costco is looking for some security on their campus, and having those buildings connected via sky bridge, you know, actually adds some value versus building really giant buildings, you know, where you basically could put the same amount of square footage in one building, or you could break it into 2 and connect it with a sky bridge. You could say, well, I'd rather have the 2 smaller footprints connected by a sky bridge, because then there's views and other things that happen in between. My worry about potentially wrapping this around pedestrian safety is now you're potentially opening the door for sky bridges throughout all of kind of CIP. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. I think we want to be careful with sky bridges. I think used for particular purposes in limited spaces could be okay, but the proliferation of sky bridges throughout Issaquah would probably not be what any of us in this room want. So that was my 2 cents.
I think your question about, or your citing of Amazon was probably apt relative to that point. There's probably as many people moving around that campus and having to move between blocks as there is here. So probably the pedestrian conflict wouldn't be the tipping point, shall we say. Okay. SEPA, or the State Environmental Policy Act. That was, you guys had a lot of questions around that, so hopefully this will help to clarify that. Central Issaquah had an environmental impact statement, or EIS, and that has established a development threshold for the urban core of 2.4 million square feet of commercial without additional SEPA review. So that means that those impacts have been looked at, and as a planned action ordinance, there's you're generally saying, is this consistent with what was shown in the EIS? And if it was, then that's the extent of SEPA review. And typically when you do these kinds of environmental impact statements, as businesses come in, it's on a first-come, first-served basis. And Costco was part of developing that EIS, and so they are first. Pickering Place, 1.5 million square feet that we've been talking about, is a subset of the overall 2.4 million square feet that was anticipated in the urban core. There was other uses that were reviewed in the EIS for the urban core, including almost 5,000 multifamily units and almost 500,000 square feet of service and retail. But I think there are a couple of points to make here. One is that this is a 30-year plan, and will have to be revisited periodically, which may necessitate additional environmental review or consideration by the city. The other thing is that if a project exceeds that threshold, that doesn't necessarily mean there's another EIS. What it means is that there has to be a review to determine if there are unanticipated impacts, and there may or may not be. And so that would be the action that would be necessary if a project wanted to propose something beyond what was already covered in the EIS. Oh, and Mel asked a question in an email earlier today. Rowley had a separate environmental impact statement, so they are not a subset of this threshold.
Great, thanks. So the 1.5 million square feet, the package said it would use up much of the office square footage? How much is much?
Well, so the total is 2.4 million, and this is 1.5, so that leaves 900,000 square feet of commercial in the urban core.
So if somebody came in and wanted to build 1 million square feet of office, or 900,000, they could. It doesn't have to be just service retail of 500,000 or.
Right, there is still additional unused square footage that was reviewed as part of the EIS.
So if you came in, let's say you came in and the package right now is there's an extra 500,000 square feet of retail. And let's assume that somebody came in and said, you know, I don't want to do 500,000 square feet of retail. I want to do 250,000 square feet of office. Okay? So what you need to do is basically you take a look at the impacts of office versus retail. And for the most part, office is less impacting than retail. Retail is a higher trip generator. You'd basically take a look and see if doing that caused any impacts that weren't already addressed in the Central Issaquah Plan EIS. If the answer is no, then you're kind of out the door and you're good. If let's say it does generate an impact that wasn't evaluated with the original EIS, you would have to do additional environmental review.
So does it mean that anybody that wants to do any office, if this is approved, any proposed office buildings in the central area, in the urban core, would have to go through that process?
Outside of Rowley and
Outside of Rowley
No.
and Costco?
No, there's still, because this is only 1.5 and there was 2.4. Right?
right.
Is 2.4 just office, or is the 2.4
It's
office?
just commercial, so, which includes office.
But does not include the 497 of
Right.
service retail?
That's separate.
Oh, okay, so there's 900 out there.
Well, there's 900, right, of commercial, which would include office.
Okay.
And then almost 500 of service retail.
Gotcha. And then 4,800 of multifamily.
Right. So to take Keith's example, if someone came in and said, I want to do 1 million, you could take the 900,000 of commercial and then for the other 100,000, look at the retail and whether there were unmitigated impacts.
Gotcha.
Or not.
Okay. So if somebody comes in and wants to do 200,000, it fits within the 2.4, you're still okay.
Right.
All right. So I guess one of the thoughts I had about this, one of the concerns would be 15 years down the road, everything's going great, things are being built out. Costco's built 1 million square feet of more space. They still have 500,000 square feet in their pocket, and everything else is built out. And do they sort of sit there and hold the cards of everybody else's sort of stuck in the queue, not being able to do something, and wondering if there's a way to, I guess, revisit this down the road to say, okay, if it hasn't built, let's say they don't build anything out for 15 years, if it's just sitting there undeveloped, is there a way for the city to go back and say, we need to rethink this reservation of all that square footage?
So I'd answer that a couple different ways. One is, I mean, if developers are knocking down our doors to build in Central Issaquah Plan, then I think what that's telling me is the market's great and we don't need to do a thing. Let the market figure itself out. Because it doesn't mean just because the entitlement that was evaluated with the EIS is done, that puts a moratorium on development in the rest of the city. It just means that additional SEPA has to be done, and the advantage of having the planned action ordinance is gone. If But let's take a different scenario, and 15 years from now, Costco's doing whatever they're doing, and it doesn't matter. But let's say that we have another project on Gilman that wants to happen and doesn't, because, you know, it's on the tipping point on whether it makes sense for the developer, and, you know, the environmental review is going to take a long time, and it's kind of a discouragement. The city could choose to do another EIS to entitle that next block of development that would then clear the way for more properties to redevelop under the CIP. So the city could take the initiative to help facilitate that next phase beyond the first 2.4 million that was evaluated with the initial planned action EIS. So it doesn't mean that it's at the end. It means that we all get to like look at it and decide, you know, should we help incent additional development, or is the market doing what it should, and we've primed the pump with Costco and with Rowley and some other things, and now it's going on its own.
Great. Okay.
Okay. Development Commission's role in the review of future permits. So there were some questions around this. This is a slightly different process than what happened with other Central Issaquah permits, and so I want to unpack that a little bit. The land plan, which is before you right now, is really the Commission's opportunity to review and approve a permit, and this is similar to other land use permits in that sense. Some information, such as specific designs for the landscape, the community spaces, and the buildings, are not included in the land plan drawings. However, we have imagery, which were the photo sheets that Costco provided, as well as the existing campus, which do set sort of minimum bar and the character and the design that would be employed for those future phases, future buildings. And in addition to this review, the Commission and the public would have another opportunity to comment on the proposals as they come in the future, assuming that they're over 150,000 square feet, because that is the threshold that Central Issaquah set for what has public review versus administrative only review.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions tonight. Sorry. So this is an area I got a little hung up last time because we're still trying to get comfortable with the process changes that occurred with the Central Issaquah plan. So bear with me here a little bit. So in this particular instance, we are going through a process of reviewing, as you said, the images and essentially the site layout. And we're going to make a recommendation to the council, who is the authority, the decision-making authority for development agreements. So I understand that. And there will be multiple buildings that will come back through for entitlements for construction permits as this, as Costco proceeds with their office park development or their office campus. So, but those, when they're over 150,000 square feet, would come back here for a community conference. We would give our 2 cents, and then staff would make the ultimate, would be the decision maker, or the director, or whoever the designated authority is. Okay, so is that an accurate restatement of what you just said? Okay, yeah. I got it.
That was actually way more detailed than what I said.
So
Thank you.
The other process for, let's just say it's a separate parcel of property. It's in the Central Issaquah plan area, and it's over 150,000 square feet. It comes to the Development Commission. We'll do a community conference, but we're also the decision maker for those entitlements. Is that right?
So no, there's a slight adjustment. So like this permit, they only come once. You don't get a community conference. That's an option that an applicant could choose to take, but a community conference is no longer required.
Okay.
But you would be on those. In this case, it's a consolidated permit, so the council is the decision maker. But the council is really looking to the commission, as you normally do, to provide the really in-depth review of the land use permit. With those, say Seventh and Gilman, as we take an example, you are the decision maker, but you're doing the same kind of review that you're doing now. A community conference would not occur didn't occur with Seventh and Gilman and would not have to occur with any other buildings over 150,000 square feet.
Under 150,000 square feet, they wouldn't even come to the commission.
That's right.
So,
And just a nuance point, because I think it's an important one, is if Costco, so let's assume those 3 buildings that are on their land plan end up being 4-story buildings. You know, that, if you do the math, that accounts for only about half of the entitlement that Costco's getting with their development agreement, which means that the other 750,000 square feet is going to be built on buildings that are not part of the land plan. Those, assuming they're done in 150,000 square foot increments or more, they would come to DC for a decision, like any other property in the central Issaquah plan area.
right. Since they're outside of the area that's defined within this land plan that will be approved as part of the development agreement.
Yes.
But you just said 750,000. Actually, we're giving them 1.5 million square feet.
So I think what Keith is trying to say is,
Maybe not very clearly.
Or I'm just,
These
look,
four-
maybe I'm tired tonight. I don't know.
these 4 buildings are shown on the land plan. And assuming that they stay basically as they're shown, you're reviewing and approving these buildings now. But they could be between 4 and 10 stories. That's what they've been shown as. If they're 10 stories, they're done. They will have used all their 1.5 million. If they're 4 stories, there's a bunch of allowable development that is not accounted for and would show up someplace else, and that would go through the process just like the 7th and Gilman project did.
Okay. So where I'm going with this is the level of detail that we're working at with the land plan review versus the level of detail that we're typically working on previously, prior to the central Issaquah plan, is significantly different, where we had architectural renderings, much more detail, material selections were part of the review, et cetera. And so this is really, we're moving the blocks around on the property, and that's about the extent of our review. And I'm oversimplifying a little bit just to make my point. So there's the shift here is a huge movement toward relying on professional staff for the review and away from what was a detailed level of review by the commission. So our role has fundamentally changed when it comes to the central Issaquah plan permits.
So I'm just going to be kind of picky here for a second. If it's not on the land plan, you'll see it at the level of review that we are currently reviewing permits. You're absolutely right that the level of review that the commission was doing prior to central Issaquah was significantly more. Even if this was, I mean, as you discovered with 7th and Gilman, there is still a level of detail that is not, we're not going to almost construction permits to review a land use permit. So there is a more conceptual, I'm not sure if that's the right word, review, point at which the commission is being asked to weigh in. You are correct that those detailed elevations and community space plans are not shown. And the substitute, maybe, for that we're proposing is the existing campus. Because the point is to continue that. That may not be sufficient to you. I just want to be clear that that's why that was brought forward to you.
But just to clarify again, this is, I'm just trying to understand. I don't know that I have a point here. I'm just trying to understand. So if, for this particular review, this is the level of detail we're operating at to make the recommendation to the council who make the decision. For other projects that are outside of the land plan that's being contemplated here or considered here, over 150,000 square feet. The level of detail we will get, though, in those reviews will be at more granular level than what we're getting here. Is that
I would expect it would be
accurate?
similar to 7th and Gilman.
Okay, because that was our...
Is that fair?
Yes.
7th and Gilman was less detailed than we were previously getting, but it was more detailed than this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So in this case, we're saying, okay, staff, we're weighing in with our, areas of emphasis, et cetera, but it really is going to be a professional review we're going to have to rely on for implementation. So we're going to have confidence that that's happening.
Yes and no, and this may not be, again, satisfying. I think that was the importance that we placed on bringing it back to the commission and having an opportunity to hear public and commission perspective on, does this meet Central Issaquah? Is this consistent with the land plan? Does this meet those expectations? You're right, it is not a decision-making role, but it is not thank you, professional staff. It's not just professional staff operating completely back of house. We would be bringing it forward to get that input.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah.
That helps me a lot.
And I guess the way I'd understand it too is what we're saying is, well, the imagery that you provide is the current campus, what they've built. Does that essentially become part of the land plan itself then? Because I understand the idea. We've said Costco's built some really nice buildings that I think if we said these are going to look like, I think they would sort of fit everybody's criteria. And what you're going to be doing is saying, are they going to build something of this quality, fenestration, all that? And so would this be, in essence, part of the land plan?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That is part of the land plan.
Yeah.
And I think, that's, I think, part of the value that we see in bringing it back. We may say, okay, that's a similar level of detail and quality of materials and detailing. And the commission might say, no, we don't think it is for the following reasons. And that's a conversation that we want to have.
Okay. I guess I sort of feel comfortable enough that they've built some really nice stuff, so keep doing that.
You sure asked a lot of good questions, Mike. Yeah, which dovetail into what I'm going to ask. Now, we're approving this land plan with configuration concept blocks of buildings, which I'm sure there's a lot of study that went into it based on the configuration of the building. When the plans are put together for one building, why is it not coming back to the commission for review?
So if the building is 150,000 square feet or more, it will come back for commission input.
Mm-hmm.
It just would not be for a decision because you're making the decision now.
Yeah, but the decision is to approve or recommend approval of the land plan. And there's a lot of talks about trails tying into the building, the sky bridge. Everybody has their own concept of how it should be, why it shouldn't be there, and that kind of thing. I have my way of thinking how the trail ties into it. We talked about little retail shops. Everybody has their own concept, but and so yeah, there's that limit of 150,000 square feet. Then it comes back here, but right now we're kind of asked to recommend concept based on those blocks. And how's the block, there's a lot of details that needs to go in before it becomes a viable place, enjoyable place. So I guess, with 150 square feet, how many stories are we talking about? 4?
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
Well, actually, 4 would, I think, be 240,000. I think they're about a 60,000 square foot floor plate, more or less.
So let's say 4, and to tie it with the trail, I have my concept of how retail ties into the trail, coffee shop, lunchtime, kind of sitting around that kind of, and not warehouse, Costco retail. So everybody has their own concept of how it should be. So I guess, I feel uncomfortable in a way, or maybe I'm not understanding it. We're approving land plan, but yet there's still a lot of unworked details that's not worked out.
So if I can offer something, so there's some choices that you guys have, and I just want to make sure you guys kind of know the ground rules as we're going through this. So right now, the development agreement has proposed language on how all this is going to work. You guys, at the end of the day, could recommend, no, we don't like that particular piece. We want to be the decision maker on every permit in excess of 150,000 square feet. You guys have the ability to make that recommendation at the end of the day. Right now, I've got DC review up on the parking lot. Part of, you know, if you guys are going to go down that path, it's helpful for us to know what the issues are. I think there's been some conversations about, it does move the bar. You know, as Mike mentioned earlier, this is moving the bar a little bit, and you know, you guys, I think, need to gauge, are you giving up any of the responsibilities that you're tasked with in terms of reviewing, you know, site development permits in the city? And if so, let's talk about that, because I think Costco, who has proposed this process, and you know, staff, I think, believe that you guys get to see the pieces that you should have input on. But if there are pieces, Ray, that you don't feel comfortable with because this is too conceptual for you, then throw that out to us. Let us hear that so that we can talk about that and see if there's some things that we can offer that might help you get over that hump and feel that, you know what, I get it. If they want to build those buildings like that, we've talked about the penetrations. We know generally how tall they are. We know where the parking is. You know, I've got pictures. I've got imagery of existing Costco buildings. I'm good. Or I'm not good, and here's why I'm not good. It's helpful for us to kind of have that level of clarity if you can provide it. And again, at the end of the day, if this is just not something that you're comfortable with, you know, as we collect the recommendation out of you guys, you know, you don't have to support that. You can say, I support all of this, but I don't support that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and one thing I would add is, if Mike and Mel mud wrestle or arm wrestle and we come to a draw, we can also send that forward. You know, that there isn't a consensus among the commissioners. And those are the kinds of topics that then we will carry forward that recommendation to Land and Shore and on to the council. Because these are the kinds of things that you guys have more experience with, these kinds of issues, adjustments, interpretations, etc. And this is really what they're looking for from you, is based on your experience, where things make sense and where things raise concerns,
right,
and whether we can address those or not.
Yeah, and that's great. You know, Keith, you clarified that very well. And so I guess the point that I was trying to make is that, yeah, you're right. It feels uncomfortable to approve blocks of buildings that just blocks and then just let it go. And so I guess to kind of ease the comfort level here, the fear, is
Lucy, can you go back to that slide with the buildings? It's my understanding that the land use, that these are conceptual ideas of what the buildings will be like. Doesn't mean they're going to look like that. I mean, it doesn't mean they're going to be like an eye and whatever that thing is in the corner, and maybe the only one that's really probably fixed would be the curved one. The other ones could vary. What we're being asked to do is approve them. They're going to be over 150,000 square feet, so that it would come back to us to give our feelings about what the modulation is and the color scheme and the windows and the sky bridges. But we wouldn't have a decision. We would just give, that would just be input that would go where. We could say, well, we don't really like the way that building looks. We think you should have more modulation. What happens?
So staff would, to be honest, we get lots of comments from you, some of which are related to the Central Issaquah standards, and some of which are other things that you want to tell us that we're glad to hear. The ones that are related to the Central Issaquah standards, which are the tools that we have to review by, we're going to take pretty seriously. So let's say, it comes in as a completely round, or this building, these two buildings become one big monolith.
Yeah.
And it comes right up behind the street and there's no community space there. We might come back to you and say, we don't think this is consistent with the land plan. We think that it should go back through as if it's a brand-new building that wasn't part of the land plan. I'm not saying that's what we would, I'm not sure exactly what those triggers are. We would have to face that at the time. And that's part of the reason that we wrote the staff report and we provided that chart looking at each of the standards in Central Issaquah and evaluating which ones would be evaluated with future permits and which we think have been addressed now.
On the other hand, that big monolith could come in and you could say, yeah, it's fine by us, it's close enough. And everybody on the staff here would say, no, that's not what we thought we were dealing with.
Yeah,
Then what happens?
I think there's a reality here that you're not indiscriminately making decisions on, and I recognize that those are blocks, but those blocks are constrained by the Central Issaquah Development Design Standards. I mean, it's not carte blanche. You can't. That's what the value of the Central Issaquah plan and the CIDDs were, is to be able to set the parameters, and they are more conceptual than being able to see all the on the ground stuff. But there's a context and a framework that they have to comply with, and we do have the responsibility to look at whatever is proposed and say that's not consistent with what the standards are. And even be so bold as to say you guys missed it. There's a design standard here, a parameter that you're kind of letting go, and we think you ought to reinforce that.
Right. And so really, there's going to be that conversation. There is going to be, I think the question is, do you feel that it's necessary to have, and this is, I'm just stating this, there's no judgment associated with it. Do you feel that you need to have the decision-making authority to make it happen, or do you feel that the ability to have that conversation is sufficient? And that kind of is the question. And by setting a certain framework through the land plan, is that sufficient to guide that future conversation or not? And that's we've put something out there. We're having a conversation about it, and this is what we need to be hearing. And it's on the parking lot.
We could probably go on a long time on this one, so let's move on.
And I think you guys, this has been a good conversation, and I've got a ton of stuff in my head, and we could spend the next hour talking about it, but I need to talk about it with them, and we'll do that tomorrow. And part of all of this is getting back to you guys on what hopefully will be the silver bullet. So that's the goal.
So I'm handing it over to my fine colleague from New Orleans to talk about the MTFA.
I should say, who's that? Hi, Sheldon.
I'm nicer than he is.
I was noticing nobody was standing up. Nobody wanted to say I'm from New Orleans. Sorry.
Voila. Just to remind folks, thank you. I'm Sheldon Lynn with the Department of Public Works Engineering, and a question came up about, what are these projects that are incorporated into the Master Transportation Financing Agreement? And essentially, there are three projects that are incorporated into it. There's what I term as kind of the anchor project, which is a new road connection between East Lake Sammamish Parkway and Lake Drive. Essentially, it's a reconstruction and realignment of Southeast 62nd Street here, creating a new intersection with the undercrossing that came in this way a few years back, 221st, and an extension of Southeast 62nd Street all the way over to here. This is a widening as well to accommodate the large volumes of traffic for turning movements and so forth in here, as well as it's going to have multimodal facilities along the north side connecting into the East Lake Sammamish Trail. This section of road from here to here is about 2,000 feet long. It's going to be constructed primarily, about half of it is a bridge structure to avoid the environmental constraints and so forth through here. It will be a raised bridge structure. And then an intersection, and then coming back in here with a 2/3 lane facility because of the volumes of traffic and turning movements into the planned Costco building here. The roadway section up here is going to have bike lanes, 3 lanes of traffic, and curb gutter, sidewalk, and landscaping as well. Trying to fit something in where there's existing development and the like to do our best to meet the core street standards. You'll note that I did not include bicycle lanes on this road due to the high cost of the bridge structure and so forth. We're going to enhance the Pickering Trail through here. Right now it's only about 8 to 10 feet wide on this side of the creek, and we're going to widen it to about 12 to 14 feet wide to allow for multimodal use. And the bicycle facilities and pedestrians will be allowed, will be connected into the trail, and they can use the trail to reach and make their way westward or come eastward and come over here to this intersection. So, another component of this is that the current crossing of the East Lake Sammamish Trail is at grade with the existing roadway. There's going to be a grade separated crossing for the East Lake Sammamish Trail. The road is going to go over the top of the trail. So there won't be any pedestrian conflicts, and the regional trail can move a lot smoother. The other the next largest project in the suite of improvements is East Lake Sammamish Parkway. That one, it's currently constrained in capacity heading southbound by only 1 lane of traffic going southbound through here through the entire length of the project, essentially. The project's going to add a bike lane, add a lane of traffic southbound, and curb, gutter, sidewalk, and landscaping on the west side of East Lake Sammamish Parkway, as well as intersection improvements here to improve the operations of that intersection. This project is completely designed, and we're going to be starting the right-of-way acquisition process here in the next few months with anticipated construction next year. The smallest of the 3 projects in the suite of improvements is over here at 12th and SR 900 and Northwest Sammamish Road. And we have a large degree of congestion through this for ingress and egress into the Pickering area, as well as Holiday Inn, Tully's, City Hall Northwest. This project's going to include bike lanes on both sides of the 12th Avenue coming through here, and it's going to add a left turn pocket coming this way, turning towards I-90. Currently there's a single left turn pocket, so there will be a double left turn pocket in the future to reduce the queues through there and allow improved operations for this signal. The purple line right here on SR 900 is actually going to be an added right turn lane only. Currently there's 2 lanes. One of them is a through right. We're going to create a dedicated right-hand turn movement in there. Again, to help the operations of that signal and traffic to be able to move more freely through this corridor, as well as ingress and egress into the Pickering. These projects together are roughly $50 million in cost, estimated. So that's kind of the overview.
Yeah, what kind of time schedule are you looking at, Sheldon?
Time schedule on this, I mentioned the East Lake Sammamish Parkway hopefully starting construction next year. Mm-hmm. We expect all these projects to be finished by 2020.
2020. Thank you.
I've got a question, and I know, Keith, you may be able to answer it, because it dealt with the letter response to Mr. Williamson.
I'm glad I came back then.
Yeah, I am too. And I looked for it, and I couldn't find it in the red, blue, yellow, green cross-out development. But the last sentence, on reserving transportation certificate violates the law. It dealt about Costco's contribution of 24 mil, thereabouts. Mm-hmm. And then that should Costco elect to build less than 15 million square feet, then they have over mitigated for traffic impacts, and the draft development agreement contemplates their ability to be reimbursed for any overpayment. Can you explain that? To me, that means that Costco says they're going to give us $24 million if they build out fully to what the plan is. If they build out half of that, then they're going to want $12 million back. And where does that come from?
So,
I mean, who makes up the difference?
so the concept right now is that, you know, because of the timing, if you look at Exhibit H, which is the MTFA, the timing for Costco's payment goes concurrently with Public Works building those streets. That's expected to happen in the next 6 years. So as Sheldon gets out there with his shovel and starts building these roads, he's going to be invoicing Costco, and they're going to be paying their $23.75 million to cover their fair share. Let's assume that 10 years from now, Costco's built half of their entitlement, and they decide, because of downturn, people working out of their house, we all becoming midgets, I don't know, that they don't need as much square footage. And so they now have over-mitigated because they've participated in building roads that are going to go unused by them. Mm-hmm. And so the concept here is they should be able to monetize that investment in public infrastructure in some way. Now, what this says is that they could potentially sell those trips to other developers that could then, instead of paying their traffic impact fees, they could buy those trips from Costco. And then it's basically like transferring a concurrency certificate from one developer to another. And then they come to the city and say, we own now 900 trips, and instead of having to pay those to the city to get our concurrency, we can now build because we're taking advantage of what we bought from Costco. That's it in a very loose and non-legal way.
Like TDRs.
Kind of like TDRs.
So it's not really a kickback of money.
It's not really so Costco would get paid for their investment in the public streets by a developer of some sorts. And it could be the city. Now let's...
And if there was no developers that wanted to buy those, then
they just wait.
They just wait. And that's spelled out clearly.
There's no guarantee here that I read.
So they can't force the city to buy it.
You can't they can't force the city to buy it back.
No, that's not in here, not in any color.
Okay. Yeah. I said, I saw the thing on trips and stuff like that, but I didn't know if that was dealt with the money, yes.
You know, so the conversation we've had with Costco is they believe that they want to continue to build, expand their campus in Issaquah. You know, I think what they were saying is, what happens if we don't build 1.5? And this was just a way for them to possibly recoup some of their investment. There's no guarantee here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I have a question, I guess maybe for Jerry. It keeps getting mentioned about the $23.7 million that they're putting up, but when I look at the numbers, it's the 23.7 is the first 48%, and then the city kicks in 2.5, and then Costco kicks in 2.5. So when I add those up, I get the 26.2 million, and I keep wondering, it sounds like to me, like reading it, that they're committing to 26 million, not 23. Am I missing something?
The other items are a contingency amount above what's estimated. So if the project has justifiable reasons where we have, the budget needed to be increased over the estimates that we have today, the city has requested, and Costco has partnered, said, yeah, we'll help share in that risk up to 10% over what your current estimate is. And so that's where you get the 2.5 and the 2.5, and the incentive is that, they want the city to take the first 2.5 because it's an incentive, one, for us to be a little bit more diligent, hopefully, to keep the project in line in cost, and keep it on schedule. And then the other component is the second 2.5, Costco would bear that burden on their own. And then if it really just goes out of sight, the city takes the responsibilities over that.
Okay, great.
So that's a contingency factor. It's a sharing in the risk of schedule, materials costs, labor costs, things like that.
Great, perfect. So it's not an optional item for them if it goes
No, that's
over,
non-optional. Those are non-optional things. The scope of the projects are defined in the MTFA under the Exhibit H2, I think it's called. And that's the scope of the projects.
Thank you. And I hope this isn't too off topic, but since we have you there, can I ask about future expectations of an I-90 overpass that would connect into Lake Drive?
Oh, that's way off topic. No. You're speaking of the 12th Avenue overcrossing, and I give a big circle here. That's shown in the Central Issaquah plan. That is still on the radar screen, and I believe there's been comments both at Land and Shore as well as the Infrastructure Committee about with the expansion areas and things like that, and if expansion occurred in this area by Costco, the land plans and so forth as get developed for this area need to consider how the landings and accommodating for the 12th Avenue overcrossing. That's future land use planning that we need to be cognizant of as development proposes in this area.
Okay.
Next slide.
So, actually, that's okay. So that's my coverage of the 8 topics with help from a friend, phone a friend. Costco, before we move on to sort of other questions, Costco wanted to do a presentation. Jackie is going to be doing this. You just use the keys to go up and down, and if you can point using the mouse.
Very good.
Great.
Thank you, Lucy. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Jackie Frank, Vice President of Real Estate Development for Costco Wholesale. I wanted to take a slightly different approach, but hit many of the same topics that Lucy covered this evening. First of all, I want to say that this development agreement is very important to us, and we believe that it's important to the city. Issaquah is our home, and from a corporate point of view, and for many of us personally. I kind of want to take it from the top because it's kind of who we are and what we do and how we run our business. First of all, as you know, our job is to continually provide our members with quality goods and services at the lowest possible prices. And the way we do this is, number 1, to obey the law. Number 2, take care of our members. 3, take care of our employees. Number 4, respect our suppliers and our partners. And if we do all of these things correctly, well, we believe ultimately at the end of the day we're going to reward our shareholders. So, how is this relevant to our discussion this evening? Well, first of all, let's obey the law. We've demonstrated a consistent track record to adhere to and to exceed the requirements of the MSP over time, which at the time we were implementing the city's vision. And going forward, we're committed to implementing the Central Issaquah plan and the Central Issaquah Development Design Standards, and through that manifesting the city's vision for an urban and a more dense and a vibrant environment. What this does for us, it allows Costco, taking advantage of the CIP, to do real infill development for higher densities consistent with the CIP and the SIDS. As you know, we've grown as a company. As I mentioned last time, we've become the 2nd largest retailer in the country, the 3rd largest in the world, and we're currently ranked number 19 in the Fortune 500. As we grow locations and grow our ancillary businesses, we need to add central support to support the growth of our business. It's very simple. Under the original MSP, back from '87, as Lucy said, back in 2002, we ran out of capacity. We ran out of the ability to add a single square foot of development to our campus from a development point of view. And as we continue to grow and evolve, the only option available to us under the MSP was to lease nearby buildings. So there was Lake Place 1, there was Lake Place 2, there was the Space Labs property, and now the Microsoft building at the Vulcan development. Under the DA, the increased densities allow us to accommodate future business growth. It allows us to consolidate our employees, and most importantly, it allows us the ability to realize synergies and efficiencies that are inherent in a purposefully designed campus. Now, the history of the DA is pretty simple. In 2007, we became a member of the city's committee to consider the rezoning of the valley floor, members of that task force. Up to 2012, we participated in the city's visioning process, and we provided input to the Development Commission as well as the City Council for the proposed development and design standards. And beginning in 2013, we worked very closely with staff in applying the SIDS to our campus through a development agreement, and that's why we're here tonight. As far as some of our other codes of ethics, taking care of our employees and respecting our suppliers is a high priority to us. Over the past 20 years, we've demonstrated the ability to develop within your regulations to create a first-class corporate campus. Now, we're not a developer who develops and flips. We're a long-term participant. We're a long-term partner. And, as I've said, over the past 20 years, we've kept all of our promises. As evidenced by the continuity, the consistency, the commitment to quality, the commitment to land stewardship, to quality architecture, to landscaping, to community amenities, to traffic and pedestrian circulation, all in the context of the natural environment, the habitat, Issaquah Creek, Lake Sammamish, etc. At the same time, this is a private development, but it's a private development in the sense that programmatically it's meant to serve as a secure, safe, efficient international headquarters to thousands of employees, and also our vendors and supplier community, who frankly spend a lot of time here in the Issaquah community. The MSP established the theme and the pattern of development beginning in 1987. The SIDS, implementing the vision of the CIP, allows for the next growth opportunity for higher density, community amenities, circulation paths, building on the context previously established both with the existing street patterns and the surrounding natural environment. This is not a scrape and rebuild scenario. That would be wasteful. And we're not about waste. We're about efficiency. This is truly an infill development opportunity in the context of marrying the existing conditions while implementing the city's vision and the more urban development standards. And yet, although a privately owned corporate campus, there are no walls, there are no gates, there are no fences, there are no barriers per se. Many people use the amenities associated with the Issaquah Creek Trail, the barn environment, and the pond trail. It's actually fairly heavily used by the public. We've integrated this into this context are the pedestrian connections, the employee plazas, places to linger, places to eat, places to play, and places to work. Our property is not a civic facility or a public park, yet it's an awesome place to work. What I'd like to do is show you a few things. And this goes to the point of trying to not only meet or exceed the previous development requirements, but also to keep our promises over the years. So when we look at buildings we built and how we define entrances, we look at Building 3 with entrances as well. We also look at how the buildings sit on the site and create community space or plaza space for our employees and our guests. This happens to be adjacent to the pond, as well as on the back side of Building 3, adjacent to the pond area, an integrated plaza that's heavily used for dining, for lingering, for meetings, etc. And we even have places for play. Part of our, this is just this past week, and our employees at lunch are notorious for pickup basketball games. Now, we also use the plazas for product mock-ups, for showcase items that were for sale, but we also do have designed and integral recreational opportunities for our employees and their guests. Within the context of the Pickering development, of course, is the community amphitheater, which does get used and is quite well integrated. And you can see small gathering and small seating places that separate both the plaza area and the natural pond area. Lush landscaping, benches, low-scale lighting, you know, a real sensitivity to scale and to detailing and to texture, and opportunities for people to, you know, to stop somewhere as they're on their way somewhere else. As far as pedestrian connections are concerned, here's an image of the Issaquah Trail adjacent to Issaquah Creek. I think what you'll find is that we have not turned our back to anything. On the contrary, the landscaping is lush and rich. And as it was said earlier, we've designed our buildings with four-sided architecture, with sensitive plaza placements, to not only not turn our back to it, but to actually integrate in such a way that you know, we can coexist within the context of the natural environment in an appropriate way, without barriers, without fences, without walls. Another shot looking south on the pond trail. And another view. Quite lovely and frankly quite heavily used.